Julio's Lost Loves. The 7 Women Who Could Have Changed Everything. In the grand theater of love, some stories are written in starlight and sealed with destiny. Others remain forever suspended in the realm of what might have been. Beautiful, haunting, and eternally unfinished. The romantic life of Julio Iglesias reads like a collection of such stories, filled with encounters so profound they could have rewritten not just his personal history, but the very landscape of international culture. These are the tales of 7 extraordinary women who crossed paths with the Spanish crooner during his rise to global stardom. Each represented more than romance. They were doorways to different lives, different destinies, different versions of the man who would become the world's most beloved voice. Each relationship that never fully bloomed carries within it the ghost of an alternative universe where love conquered circumstance, where hearts triumphed over careers, where different choices led to entirely different legacies. This is the story of Julio's lost loves, the women who could have changed everything. The Cannes Film Festival of 1973 shimmered with its usual blend of glamour and ambition. Among the crowd of aspiring stars and established legends, a young Spanish singer named Julio Iglesias moved through the evening receptions with the careful grace of someone still learning to navigate the rarefied air of international celebrity. He had come to Cannes not as a filmmaker, but as part of Spain's cultural delegation, performing at select events that celebrated the growing sophistication of Spanish arts. His career was ascending rapidly, but he remained, in many ways, the earnest young man from Galicia, who had stumbled into stardom through a combination of talent, determination, and fortuitous accident. Then he saw her. Brigitte Bardot, at the height of her legendary beauty and mystique, represented everything that seemed impossibly distant from his own world. She was French sophistication incarnate, sexual liberation personified, and artistic rebellion made flesh. When their eyes met across the crowded terrace of the Carlton Hotel, something electric passed between them, a recognition that transcended language, nationality, and the carefully constructed barriers that separated their respective worlds. She looked at me as if she could see straight through to my soul, Julio would later confide to close friends. In that moment, I felt like I understood what poets meant when they wrote about love at first sight. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. As if we had known each other in some other lifetime. The conversation that followed lasted until dawn. Brigitte, fluent in Spanish from her years filming in Spain, spoke with Julio about music, about passion, about the loneliness that comes with fame. He shared with her his dreams of becoming more than just a Spanish curiosity, of creating music that could touch hearts across all boundaries. Julio had something that most men in my world lacked, Brigitte would later recall in a rare interview. He had gentleness without weakness, ambition without cruelty. When he spoke about his music, his eyes lit up like a child's. In an industry full of predators, he was still genuinely romantic. For 3 magical days in Cannes, they were inseparable. Brigitte introduced Julio to a world of artistic sophistication he had only imagined. They attended private screenings, dined at exclusive restaurants, and spent long hours walking along the Mediterranean coast, talking about art, love, and the burden of living in the public eye. The connection was profound and immediate. Brigitte saw in Julio the authentic passion that her celebrity life often lacked. Julio found in Brigitte an intellectual equal who challenged him to think beyond his provincial Spanish upbringing. Together, they began to imagine a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. But reality intruded with the cruel precision that often characterizes the collision between love and practical life. Brigitte's career was based in France, increasingly focused on her growing involvement in animal rights activism. Julio's career demanded constant international touring, with a schedule that would keep him away from Europe for months at a time. More problematically, both carried the weight of public personas that seemed incompatible. Brigitte was the symbol of French sexual liberation, while Julio represented a more traditional, romantic ideal. Their respective management teams saw the relationship as potentially damaging to both careers. The goodbye on the final day of the festival was devastating in its tenderness. Standing on the hotel balcony as the sun set over the Mediterranean, they both knew they were watching something beautiful end before it could fully begin. If circumstances were different, Brigitte whispered. If we had met in a different time, a different place, we would have been magnificent together, Julio completed her thought. They corresponded privately for several years, their letters filled with the kind of deep emotional intimacy that their brief encounter had promised. But the practical obstacles proved insurmountable. Brigitte threw herself into her activism with increased fervor, while Julio channeled his romantic longing into songs that would become some of his most emotionally powerful work. Years later, music critics would identify 1974 to 1975 as a period when Julio's ballads took on a new depth of feeling, a quality of yearning that elevated them from mere popular songs to genuine artistic statements. They were hearing without knowing it the musical expression of a love that could never be fully realized. If Brigitte Bardot represented French sophistication, Sophia Loren embodied Italian passion in all its complex glory. When Julio met her in Rome in 1975, during a series of concerts that marked his breakthrough into the Italian market, she was at the absolute pinnacle of her career, beautiful, acclaimed, and possessed of an intelligence that matched her stunning physical presence. The introduction came through mutual friends in the Italian film industry, who thought the Spanish singer and the Italian actress might find common ground in their shared Mediterranean heritage. What they hadn't anticipated was the immediate and powerful attraction that would develop between two people who understood both the intoxication and the isolation of global fame. Julio was different from the Italian men I knew, Sophia later reflected. He had fire, but it was controlled fire. He had ambition, but it was tempered with genuine kindness. And when he sang, Madonna Mia, when he sang, you could feel your heart breaking and healing at the same time. Their first dinner together, at a private restaurant in Trastevere, lasted 6 hours. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their struggles to achieve recognition, their dreams for the future. Sophia was impressed by Julio's intellectual curiosity. Julio was captivated by her combination of earthy wisdom and sophisticated worldliness. But it was their shared understanding of the price of fame that created the deepest bond between them. Both had achieved success that exceeded their wildest childhood dreams, yet both felt the loneliness that comes with living constantly in the public eye. We understood each other without having to explain, Julio remembered. The way people look at you when you're famous, the way they want things from you, the way you can be surrounded by hundreds of people and still feel completely alone. Sophia knew all of that as well as I did. For several months, they conducted a careful romance that was part love affair, part artistic collaboration. Sophia introduced Julio to Italian filmmakers who might use his music in their projects. Julio shared with Sophia his dreams of creating a more cinematic approach to his concerts and recordings. Together, they imagined projects that could combine her visual artistry with his musical talents. They spoke of creating films that would showcase both their abilities, of developing a new form of entertainment that blended Italian cinema with Spanish musical tradition. The relationship deepened during a magical week they spent at Sophia's villa on the Italian Riviera. Away from the pressures of their respective careers, they lived like any ordinary couple, cooking together, walking on the beach, talking late into the night about their hopes and fears. For that one week, we weren't celebrities, Sophia recalled. We were just a man and woman who had found something special together. I could see how our lives could fit together, how we could support each other's careers while building something personal and lasting. But the realities of their situations proved overwhelming. Sophia was at a crucial point in her career, with film commitments that would keep her occupied for the next 2 years. Julio's recording schedule was equally demanding, with tours planned across 3 continents. More significantly, both were dealing with complex personal situations that made a full commitment difficult. Sophia was navigating her relationship with producer Carlo Ponti, while Julio was emerging from his marriage to Isabel Preisler, with custody considerations that limited his freedom. The end came gradually, rather than dramatically. Long separations led to increasingly infrequent communication. The passionate letters that had sustained them during their apart time became shorter and less frequent. Eventually, they simply stopped writing, both understanding without saying that the timing was simply wrong. The impact on Julio's music was immediate and profound. His Italian recordings from this period carry an emotional weight that critics have never been able to fully explain. Songs like Amor and Soy seem to capture something beyond mere professional technique. They convey the specific sadness of love deferred, of connections that were real but couldn't overcome the practical obstacles of complicated lives. Sofia went on to her greatest cinematic triumphs, while Julio achieved the international breakthrough that established him as a global superstar. But those who knew them both during that brief, intense period continue to wonder what might have happened if circumstances had been different. If two of the most passionate and intelligent people of their generation had found a way to build a life together. Hollywood in 1976 was a town in transition, caught between the old studio system and the emerging independent spirit that would define the next decade of filmmaking. Into this environment walked Julio Iglesias, fresh from his European successes and determined to crack the American market that had proven resistant to so many international artists. His introduction to Raquel Welch came at a Beverly Hills party hosted by producer Robert Evans, who thought the Spanish singer might bring an interesting European perspective to some upcoming projects. What Evans hadn't anticipated was the instant chemistry between the sultry American actress and the sophisticated Spanish crooner. Raquel Welch, in 1976, was more than just a sex symbol. She was a woman fighting to be taken seriously as an actress, while navigating the complex dynamics of a male-dominated industry. Her intelligence and wit had always been overshadowed by her stunning physical presence, creating a frustration that she rarely had the opportunity to express publicly. The first thing that struck me about Julio was that he looked at my face when I was talking. Most men in Hollywood look at my body and pretend to listen to my voice. Julio seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, not just how I looked saying it. Their first conversation, conducted in a mixture of Spanish and English, revealed unexpected common ground. Both were fighting for respect in industries that tended to typecast them. Julio as the Latin lover, Raquel as the American bombshell. Both felt they had more to offer than their public images suggested. Julio understood what it was like to be reduced to a stereotype, Raquel reflected. People expected him to be all passion and no substance, just like they expected me to be all beauty and no brains. We found comfort in each other's struggle to be seen as complete human beings. What developed between them over the following months was a relationship that combined genuine romantic attraction with intellectual partnership. Raquel helped Julio understand the American entertainment market, introducing him to key players in the music and film industries. Julio shared with Raquel his perspective on international artistic markets, helping her envision a career that could extend beyond Hollywood. The connection deepened during a series of private dinners where they explored the possibility of collaborating professionally. Raquel was intrigued by Julio's idea of creating music-driven films that could showcase both their talents. Julio was fascinated by Raquel's insights into American popular culture and her suggestions for adapting his European sensibility to American audiences. We started talking about doing a musical film together, Raquel remembered. Something that would combine his music with a story that showed both of us in a more sophisticated light. It could have been revolutionary, the first truly bilingual romantic musical, showing that love and music could transcend cultural boundaries. But the obstacles proved formidable. Hollywood in the 1970s was not ready for genuinely multicultural entertainment. Studio executives were skeptical about projects that couldn't be easily categorized, and both Julio and Raquel's representatives worried about the career risks of being associated with experimental projects. More personally, both were dealing with the pressures of their existing professional commitments. Raquel was under contract for films that would keep her occupied for the next 18 months, while Julio was planning the massive international tour that would establish his global presence. The relationship reached its crisis point during a weekend they spent together in Malibu, discussing their future possibilities. Both realized that while their connection was real and powerful, the practical challenges of building a life together seemed insurmountable. We were two people from different worlds who had found something beautiful together, Raquel reflected years later. But sometimes beauty isn't enough. Sometimes timing is everything, and our timing was just wrong. The parting was amicable but heartbreaking. Both recognized that they had found in each other something rare and special, but neither could see a way to make it work within the constraints of their respective careers and personal situations. The impact on Julio's American ambitions was significant. Raquel's insights had given him a clearer understanding of the American market, but losing her as both a romantic and professional partner left him more cautious about fully committing to American projects. It would be years before he would make the breakthrough into the U.S. market that they had discussed during their time together. For Raquel, the relationship had offered a glimpse of the kind of sophisticated international career she had always wanted, but never quite achieved. The musical projects they had discussed remained unrealized dreams, contributing to her eventual decision to focus more on theater and independent films rather than mainstream Hollywood productions. Among all the romantic possibilities in Julio's life, perhaps none was more poignant than his connection with Françoise Hardy, the French chanteuse whose delicate voice and introspective songwriting had made her one of Europe's most beloved musical artists. Their meeting in Paris in 1977 represented something different from his other relationships, not just attraction, but artistic kinship. Françoise Hardy was, in many ways, Julio's musical soulmate. Where other women in his life represented glamour, passion, or professional opportunity, Françoise represented pure artistic understanding. Both were singers who brought an unusual depth of emotion to popular music, transforming simple melodies into complex expressions of human experience. Their introduction came through the French music industry, where both were recording at the same Parisian studio during the spring of 1977. What began as professional courtesy, two internationally successful artists acknowledging each other's presence, quickly evolved into something much deeper. From the moment I heard Françoise sing, I knew I was in the presence of something special, Julio recalled. Her voice had the same quality I tried to achieve in my own music. The ability to make every listener feel that she was singing directly to them, sharing their most private emotions. The connection was immediate and profound. Both artists shared a melancholic sensibility that set them apart from their more commercially minded contemporaries. Both believed that popular music could be a vehicle for genuine emotional and artistic expression, not merely entertainment. Their first dinner together, at a quiet restaurant in Montparnasse, revealed the depth of their mutual understanding. They talked about the loneliness of performing, the challenge of maintaining authenticity in the commercial music industry, and the peculiar burden of success that brings fame but often leaves the artist feeling more isolated than ever. Julio understood things about being a musician that most people, even other musicians, never grasp: the way a song can consume you completely. The way you can pour your entire soul into 3 minutes of music and then have to smile and make small talk at industry parties. He knew the cost of turning your heart into a commodity. What developed between them was a relationship that was as much artistic collaboration as romantic connection. They began writing songs together, creating music that blended his Spanish romanticism with her French introspection. The results were extraordinary, songs that captured the complexity of love, loss, and longing, with a sophistication that neither had achieved alone. Our voices together created something magical, Julio remembered. Her delicacy balanced my passion. My warmth gave depth to her coolness. Together we made music that was more than the sum of our individual talents. For several months, they lived in a bubble of artistic and romantic bliss. They would spend hours in Françoise's Paris apartment, writing songs, sharing musical ideas, and exploring the possibility of creating an album together that would showcase their unique chemistry. But the very intensity of their connection became its downfall. Both were artists who needed solitude to create, yet both had found in each other a source of inspiration that was addictive and consuming. The relationship became so central to their creative process that they began to lose their individual artistic identities. We were creating beautiful music together, but I was beginning to lose myself, Françoise later explained. My own voice was becoming secondary to our combined voice. As magical as our collaboration was, I realized I was sacrificing my individual artistry for our relationship. Julio faced a similar crisis. His music had always been deeply personal, drawn from his own experiences and emotions. But, as he became more involved with Françoise, his songs began to reflect their shared experiences rather than his individual perspective. The decision to step back from the relationship was mutual but devastating. Both recognized that while their connection was extraordinary, it was threatening to subsume their individual artistic identities. They needed to preserve their separate voices in order to continue creating the music that had brought them together in the first place. The parting was gentle but final. They agreed to treasure what they had shared, while accepting that some connections are too intense to sustain. The songs they had written together were never officially recorded, remaining private treasures that represented one of the most creatively fertile periods in either artist's life. The impact on both their subsequent careers was subtle but significant. Julio's music after 1977 carried a new emotional sophistication, as if his time with Françoise had taught him new ways to express vulnerability and longing. Françoise's later work showed increased confidence and warmth, suggesting that her relationship with Julio had helped her access new emotional territories. Years later, both would acknowledge that their time together had been among the most artistically fulfilling of their careers, even as they recognized that preserving it would have required sacrificing the individual creativity that had made them successful artists in the first place. The late 1970s found Julio Iglesias at the height of his European success, touring constantly and recording albums that were topping charts from Madrid to Stockholm. It was during this period of intense professional activity that he encountered Catherine Deneuve, the French actress whose combination of stunning beauty and formidable intelligence had made her one of cinema's most compelling figures. Their meeting took place at a cultural gathering in Paris, where both had been invited as representatives of their respective artistic fields. The event was designed to celebrate Franco-Spanish cultural cooperation, bringing together artists, writers, and intellectuals from both countries. Catherine Deneuve in 1979 was at the peak of her career and personal confidence. Having worked with directors like Louis Buñuel and François Truffaut, she represented European cinema at its most sophisticated. Her reputation for intelligence and artistic integrity was matched only by her legendary beauty and poise. Julio intrigued me immediately, Catherine would later recall. He wasn't like the other musicians I had met. He spoke about his work with the seriousness of a true artist, not just an entertainer. And when he talked about Spain, about its culture and traditions, I could see the depth of his connection to his heritage. What began as professional courtesy evolved into an intellectual attraction that surprised both of them. Catherine found herself drawn to Julio's perspectives on Spanish culture and his thoughtful approach to his international career. Julio was captivated by Catherine's artistic intelligence and her sophisticated understanding of European cultural dynamics. Their conversations, conducted in flawless French, Julio had become fluent during his earlier years performing in France, ranged across topics from literature to politics to the role of art in society. Both discovered in each other an intellectual equal who could engage with complex ideas while maintaining the passion that drove their respective artistic careers. Catherine challenged me intellectually in ways that no one ever had, Julio reflected. She made me think more deeply about my music, about what I was trying to express and communicate. She helped me understand that being a popular artist didn't mean I had to sacrifice artistic integrity. The relationship that developed was unlike any other in Julio's life. Catherine was not impressed by his fame or wealth. She had her own career and financial independence. What attracted her was his mind, his genuine curiosity about the world, and his commitment to using his artistic platform responsibly. Julio had a quality that was rare among successful men, Catherine observed. He was genuinely interested in learning and growing. Most men at his level of success become closed to new ideas, satisfied with what they already know. Julio remained hungry for knowledge and new experiences. Together, they explored the intersections between music and cinema, discussing possibilities for collaboration that would combine their respective talents. Catherine introduced Julio to filmmakers who were interested in exploring the relationship between visual and musical storytelling. Julio shared with Catherine his vision for concerts that could be more theatrical and cinematic. For several months, they were inseparable when their schedules allowed. They attended cultural events together, engaged in long discussions about art and society, and began developing projects that would showcase both their talents. The connection deepened during a week they spent together at Catherine's country house in Normandy. Away from the pressures of their careers, they lived like an ordinary couple, cooking together, reading, taking long walks through the French countryside. That week showed me how compatible we were on every level, Julio remembered. Intellectually, emotionally, even domestically. Catherine was brilliant and accomplished, but she was also warm and funny and genuinely caring. I could envision a future together that would be both personally fulfilling and professionally inspiring. But the very qualities that drew them together also revealed the obstacles that would ultimately separate them. Catherine's commitment to serious cinema required her to be selective about projects, often choosing films that offered artistic challenge over commercial appeal. Julio's international career demanded a level of commercial accessibility that sometimes conflicted with purely artistic considerations. More significantly, both were at crucial points in their careers that demanded total focus and commitment. Catherine was being offered roles in increasingly important films that could define the next phase of her career. Julio was on the verge of the American breakthrough that he had been working toward for years. The end came gradually, as both realized that their respective professional obligations were pulling them in different directions. The decision to step back from their romantic relationship was mutual, reached through the kind of thoughtful discussion that had characterized their entire connection. We both understood that sometimes love means letting someone pursue their destiny, even if it leads them away from you. Our timing was simply wrong. We had found each other at a moment when both our careers required our complete attention. The impact of their relationship extended far beyond the personal. Catherine's intellectual influence on Julio was evident in the increasing sophistication of his songwriting and the more thoughtful approach he took to his international career. Julio's passion and warmth had a liberating effect on Catherine's subsequent choices, encouraging her to take on projects that were more emotionally expressive. Though their romantic relationship ended, they maintained a deep friendship and mutual respect that lasted for decades. Both would later acknowledge that their time together had been among the most intellectually stimulating and emotionally fulfilling of their lives, even as they recognized that preserving it would have required sacrifices that neither was prepared to make. By 1980, Julio Iglesias had established himself as a global phenomenon, but he remained, at heart, a man of the Mediterranean. It was perhaps inevitable that he would be drawn to Claudia Cardinali, the Tunisian-born Italian actress whose exotic beauty and fiery personality embodied everything passionate and mysterious about the region they both called home. Their paths crossed in Rome during a period when both were at the height of their international appeal. Claudia was transitioning from her earlier roles as a cinema siren to more mature, complex characters that showcased her acting ability. Julio was preparing for the massive international tour that would cement his status as the world's premier romantic balladeer. The introduction came at a party celebrating Italian cinema, where both had been invited as representatives of Mediterranean artistry. The attraction was immediate and undeniable. Two beautiful, successful people recognizing in each other a shared sensuality and passion for life. Claudia was like no woman I had ever met, Julio would later recall. She had the sophistication of European cinema, but underneath was this incredible fire, this passion for life that reminded me of why I fell in love with music in the first place. When she laughed, it was like listening to the most beautiful song. Claudia was equally impressed by Julio's combination of international success and authentic Mediterranean warmth. Unlike many of the men in her professional circle, who often seemed calculating or jaded, Julio maintained an enthusiasm and romantic idealism that she found irresistible. Julio had conquered the world, but he hadn't lost his soul, Claudia observed. He still believed in romance, in passion, in the power of art to move people's hearts. In an industry full of cynics, he remained a true romantic. What developed between them was a relationship of stunning intensity. Both were people who lived life at full volume, passionate about their work, generous with their emotions, and committed to experiencing everything the world had to offer. Together, they created a romance that seemed to embody the best of Mediterranean culture, warm, passionate, and deeply romantic. Their courtship played out across the most beautiful locations in Italy, candlelit dinners in Tuscan villages, long walks through Roman ruins, weekends at Claudia's villa on the Italian Riviera. They were two people at the peak of their beauty and success, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Every moment with Claudia felt like a scene from the most romantic film ever made, Julio remembered. She brought out a side of me that was more passionate, more alive than I had ever been. When we were together, the whole world seemed more vivid, more beautiful. The connection extended beyond the purely romantic. Both understood the challenges of maintaining authenticity while achieving international success. Claudia's experience navigating the transition from European to American cinema provided valuable insights for Julio's own ambitions to break into the American market. Claudia understood what it meant to be a Mediterranean artist trying to succeed globally, Julio reflected. She knew how to maintain your essential identity while adapting to different cultural expectations. Her advice was invaluable as I was preparing for my American breakthrough. But the very intensity that made their relationship so passionate also revealed its fundamental challenge. Both are people of strong personality and clear vision who are accustomed to being the center of attention in their respective spheres. Creating a sustainable partnership required compromise that neither was entirely prepared to make. The crisis came during a weekend they spent together in Portofino, discussing their future possibilities. Both realized that while their connection was extraordinary, they were perhaps too similar. Too passionate, too independent, too accustomed to being the focal point of their own lives. We were like two suns trying to orbit each other, Claudia later reflected with characteristic poetry. Beautiful and brilliant, but ultimately destined to burn each other up. Some connections are too intense to sustain. They consume themselves in their own fire. The decision to step back from the relationship was mutual, but devastating. Both recognized that while their love was real and powerful, it was perhaps too overwhelming to form the basis of a lasting partnership. They needed to preserve their individual identities and careers, even if it meant sacrificing what they had found together. The parting was conducted with the same passion and drama that had characterized their entire relationship. There were tears, promises to remain friends, and the mutual acknowledgement that they had experienced something rare and beautiful that would remain with them forever. The impact on both their subsequent careers was significant. Julio's music in the early 1980s carried a new emotional intensity, as if his time with Claudia had taught him new depths of passion and feeling. Claudia, later film choices, showed increased confidence in her own dramatic range, suggesting that her relationship with Julio had helped her access new emotional territories. Years later, both would acknowledge that their time together had been among the most passionate and emotionally fulfilling of their lives. Though they had been unable to build a lasting partnership, they had experienced a love that embodied everything beautiful and tragic about Mediterranean romance. Intense, transformative, and ultimately too powerful to contain within the bounds of ordinary life.